in conversation with me, but mainly it's going to be David. So let's see if we can find you, David, and I can pin you, and we can make you the person pin you over here. There we go. Good evening, David.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well, very well. So we all know you. You're an accomplished artist. You've had a number of shows, and many of us, including me, have been following and learning from your career for some time. And we want to hear about what it's like being an artist under lockdown.
Well, look, in many ways, obviously, we're going through a very tragic time now. But to take a slightly positive angle to it, on the other hand, it gives somebody like an artist or writer, gives you a lot of time to really focus and not be distracted by other things, by travel and all kinds of things, and to really focus on what. And I have actually experienced that it's been a very productive period in that respect. I was lucky that early on I got a commission in April to do a large-scale sculpture, and that meant that I could travel to a foundry near Basingstoke, where because it's a factory, you were allowed to go and work there. I was considered. I'll just show you. That's
great.
1 minute. There you go. So this is the commission I got early on in April. And it's part of a series of works called the Visitor Series, which show large sort of figures that have crash landed onto the earth. And in a way, they're fairly whimsical, but on the other hand, they have a kind of backstory, which is the idea of the outsider or the alien coming from a different culture to this culture. And that reflects very much my family history. My grandfather and father, they were refugees from Vienna. They left in 1938. So actually on some of these pieces that are called Visitors and Aliens, I've actually inscribed their names, the name of my grandfather, David Breuer-Weil, who came to London in 38 and was deemed an enemy alien here. So a lot of these works that have been shown in public places are aliens in the sense of extraterrestrials, but what they really are is people from a different country who've come as refugees in a sense. I don't know if Rafi, you want to explore that at all. But.
No, that's wonderful. That's.
Yeah.
I didn't see the Vista. I mean, you know, when you're going to show more, and I will talk about it later on. But I didn't know, and it's great that you've inscribed on them as well. So where are these going?
Well, they're going to the Czech Republic. I got the commission at the end of April, early May, and I was under a bit of pressure to make them in time for Brexit. So they were finally just finished in December, and they've been shipped off. Here they're photographed in the Morris Singer Foundry. That's the bronze foundry near Basingstoke. And I'm just going to show you. The process is actually quite interesting because here we've got a couple of photos. Sorry, that's in the foundry where I was working on the toes. So they have to be made in sections of bronze. These are made in plaster, the first sections.
Well, was this all by yourself? Did you have assistants, or?
There are assistants, but the entire original in plaster is made by me, and then they're cast. Wow. It's quite a complicated process that actually goes back thousands of years. The lost wax process. They've been making sculpture this way since times of ancient Egypt, referring to Egypt, basically.
Wow.
Which may bring into question partly the idea of being a Jewish sculptor and what that means. Just a little tip of the iceberg. I was once learning the Gemara in Avodah Zarah about what is actually allowed and what isn't. And apparently you're allowed to do anything as long as it's not an absolutely perfect human being in all regards. You can even have a little finger or toe missing. And so I wonder if a lot of these sculptures I do, where you only see part of the figure, you see just the top of the feet or the top of the head, whether that may have some connection, that you're actually showing the partial human being and leaving the rest to the imagination. So when you have these huge feet, the mind automatically recreates that whole figure, which is really, much larger than what you're actually seeing, in a way.
And it interacts with the ground because you're imagining that they're all under that ground. So it interacts with its surrounding. It doesn't just stand outside separately from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I often think sculpture is very much about our relationship with the earth and the ground. Obviously, sculpture is made out of materials from the ground. I think, in my view, some of the greatest sculptures are Stonehenge and the Avebury stone circles. Anything that really connects the human being to the ground has that kind of power. So I'm just going to...
There was a point from Ben that Ben was just asking. He says, is there any reason why one leg is smooth and the other one is rough?
Actually, I think that must be the photo, because they both have actually a similar texture to them. A lot of them are inscribed with graffiti. Now, this is an earlier version of this piece, Visitor, and this is installed actually just outside Istanbul at a helicopter pad. So maybe that's a different reading of the piece. You know, they see it as a kind of crash landing in a way, but so that's out there in Turkey, which is quite amusing when they go to different countries like that. And one of the good things about art is I'd never found there's really an issue being a Jewish artist in terms of having clients in, you know, whether in Turkey or even in Lebanon and places like that. It's never really been an issue, even though it's fairly clear what my background is, and I've never tried to hide that. So
that's good. And are these the same kind of height, those ones? So are they like twice your height, I think, something like that? So
the new commission was actually a slightly smaller version of these, but those are slightly larger.
I love this one.
It's called Alien, so it's again connected, and that's the one which definitely makes a direct reference to my grandfather Ernst. I actually wrote his name on that, and that was exhibited in London in Grosvenor Gardens near Buckingham Palace for a couple of years, and it was just opposite Euston Station for quite a long time. So this figure, and funny enough, I often make the models very, very small. I've got here, I don't know if you can see me, here's what I call the maquettes for the feet, which are quite small, and one experiments with different things first in different scales. So here's a little tiny bronze model for a piece that I haven't made yet, which is sort of a half man that would be floating in a lake. And, you know, I often play around with different materials like that to come up. This is actually made out of silver foil, just a normal commercial silver foil. That's a flexible one, a little dog. And this is actually a dinosaur, but that's been 3D scanned from the silver foil and then 3D printed and then coated in silver.
I see.
Yet, but it's quite good fun to experiment with different materials and see where you can go with that. And the new technologies actually allow for that quite well.
And did you ever, do you get public reaction? Did you get feedback that you hear about, or it's just out there and you don't know what people are thinking? Or
well, yes. I mean, when the pieces are out in public, I started really with showing more paintings and sculptures, which is more of an indoor art form by its very nature.
I remember, yeah.
And I find that you obviously reach a lot more people with outdoor sculptures. I mean, I had this one outside Euston Station, and literally hundreds of people see it every hour, which could be more than a whole exhibition of painting. You see what I mean? So there's something about the public and democratic nature of sculpture that I do find interesting in terms of access. This was in Marble Arch for a few years. It's called Brothers. I'm going to go with it just because I know we don't have much time. And that was based on a dream where my brother and I shared the same dream repeatedly for many nights. So it's actually two figures sharing one mind. And a lot of my sculptures, the idea is that there's some kind of philosophical or kind of poetic idea behind it. I'm not attempting to reflect reality as such. I try to go a bit deeper into what the meaning, you know, to create sort of symbolic works that perhaps make you think. And I think there's where my Jewish heritage comes in very, very much. This is where they're outside the church, but we won't go in.
I went to see them. I snuck in. I found a little entrance, and I went to see them in Euston. You know exactly where they are. It's a great place.
Yeah. And here's in the studio again in the in Morris Singer Foundry. That's a wonderful foundry just near Basingstoke, and that's just working from the wax maquette on the left, and then making the figure of the floating figure on the right. And that piece was called Flight, and that's when it was finished. Here's in bronze in Marble Arch. And again, I think that definitely, in my mind at least, had strong connections with the idea of tefillin, of being joined and connected to something very profoundly. So I had this idea of a human being taking off, flying. Flight, again, the idea of flight is very much to do with, you know, the Jewish man is constantly on the move. There's a Jewish artist called Ron Kittai. Maybe some of you know him, and he had this idea of, you know, the diaspora Jew who's constantly on the move. I'm sure you've heard of that. Here it's a bit of a paradox because the very things that make him fly also hold him down. If you see, I'm interested in those sort of paradoxes. And here's again a half head. This is called Visitor. This was in Chatsworth. Sotheby's did a large outdoor sculpture exhibition. And the idea of this was really to reflection, but reflection not just where you can see the reflection of the head in the pond, but it's also the idea this is about thought. You know, how do you make a sculpture that's about the actual very concept of thinking, what it means to think, reflect, and all of that kind of thing. And sometimes you can use physical materials like water and bronze together to kind of explain, or not explain, but kind of think about what it means to even think or really deeply think about something.
Well, I saw this in your future ones, instead of going down and going up, these are now emerging from the earth.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to, during lockdown, we'll get to lockdown. So this is a piece called Emergence. This was installed in Hanover Square in London. And I think this very much ties to the biblical idea of Adam, of man coming from the ground, Adamah, the idea that man is actually created from the earth. And how do you really dramatize that in a work of art? And that was my idea with that. And interesting technically, in terms of making that, I made one figure and then I cast it repeatedly. So smaller amounts of the same figure. It's actually the same figure recast in different stages. As is this is actually the latest piece. This was just finished during lockdown, and then it's just been opened. It's in Docklands, and that's a new permanent sculpture called Emergence 2 that's in Docklands. But so in my thinking, this piece is all about Adam born from the earth and that kind of idea. I even wrote the word Adam in Hebrew on this piece in Docklands.
Oh, excellent.
You'll notice that. But for them, it was the idea that Docklands is a regeneration area. I think
right.
You can have multiple readings of something, but for me, it was more.
Well, as I mentioned to you on the email we did before, there's that pasuk in Tehillim, Emet me'eretz tatzmiach, that truth emerges from the ground, and then righteousness from heaven. That it's humans' job to emerge from the ground and to do truth, and then God, if we act correctly, then righteousness comes from God from heaven. So when I saw yours, I was like, as well as literally Adamah, the emergence of truth, of which is and your figures of humans are very raw. I really love.
You're very kind. Thank you very much. But coming back to lockdown, it's been a time where there really are many hours, as we all know, more hours available. This is part of a new series that actually started in lockdown. I actually started this series the very day I got COVID, which was in March. So the very first day, there's a famous Swiss artist called Paul Klee. I'm sure you will know him. And he once said a wonderful thing. He says, doing a drawing is like taking a line for a walk, which I very much like that idea, taking a line for a walk. So basically, I started taking a line for a walk on March the 20th when I first got ill with COVID. It was like having the flu. It wasn't, I was ill, but it wasn't terrible. But what I did in order to keep myself going was one very, very complex drawing that took hours and hours every single day. This is one of the most recent ones, and I kept that going through the whole period of the first lockdown. And as you can see, there's a lot of detail here, so I spent hour upon hour. The idea behind this one is obviously it's a map of the world, but everybody in their own little bubble.
Right.
Which it's a motif. I've used that motif before in a very different way, which I'll show you. This is the first of the lockdown golden drawings. I think you can see it's dated 18th to 19th of March 2020. There's now about 90 of them in the series. This one is partly based on William Blake. It's also going for a walk by the Wildwood Ponds every day, which I did every day. And I covered my face in a scarf, looks like a kind of medieval maniac going for a walk. And then I must say, I was having these kind of almost like waking dreams or ideas as I was walking. So I imagined that whole tree filled with people, almost like a Last Judgment. There's something quite apocalyptic about these, because I think we're living in an apocalyptic time. It feels like a time of plague and all of that. And that often, actually in the past, has inspired periods of artistic creativity. How do you reflect that period in time, that sort of apocalyptic period? And here are more from the series where you see the whole world is almost like a COVID, floating above the Wildwood Ponds as I'm going for a walk. Something a bit threatening about that. And then this vast perspective of people coming and going, and some of the people almost like transforming into animals as they go. There's something very uncanny about this period in time. I wanted to reflect that in these works. This is one of the largest of the series, which brings, I mean, there's no time now, but there's a lot of actually Jewish imagery in this particular work, which is a view of time present and time future, and bringing together different aspects of heritage and ancestry, and even DNA.
Yes, I can see the tree of life and the Kabbalah in the hands, yes, and DNA and tefillin, yes.
Yeah. So
could you explain out the theme of the gold?
Yeah, the gold. Well, during the first lockdown, there was tremendously glorious weather. I don't know if you remember, in March, uncharacteristic March and April. And I wanted how to fill these works, apart from the slightly disturbing subject matter it sometimes has, with that uncanny light that we had at that time. So gold is used in medieval manuscripts a lot, also Hebrew, Jewish manuscripts too. So I wanted to make a reference to sort of the medieval times where there were periods of plague as well, almost as if these are contemporary manuscript for this period of time. And actually the series has just been published in a book in Italy, the whole series. So which kind of explains the idea of making a contemporary apocalyptic manuscript as such.
Right. Are we able to get hold of it in London, or?
Yeah, it's on Amazon actually.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's called David Breuer-Weil Drawing. Sorry for the plug, but you can ignore it entirely.
No, it's okay. I asked. Thank you.
Now, during the 2 lockdowns, I don't know how many of you, but you could go to museums in London. It was very nice, actually. Nobody was there. You booked online. So I went to the National Gallery like loads of times. You could just book online and go there and pretty much have the place to yourself. So I found a few isolated works when I was going around the different galleries that really inspired me. This is called the Wilton Diptych, which is one of the earliest English paintings made under Richard II, and that's his symbol, the white heart there. And then on the left is the symbols of all the kings of England from Edward the Confessor onwards. And that inspired me actually to make a contemporary version, because that painting was painted not that long after the Black Death. So I wanted to kind of make that connection, and ended up making this, which I called the COVID diptych, which there are angels on the other side of the diptych that you saw there. So I wanted to show almost like the NHS, as if they're the contemporary angels today. You can see that on the top right, there's images of clapping hands. And I thought every Thursday night when we went out to clap in applause for the NHS, there was something so powerful, beautiful and human and poetic about that I really wanted to express that. And on the left, rather than images of royalty, which you have in the original or the medieval panel, it's the idea of a family all connected with each other, kind of enduring this period together and all the concerns. And that's the other side of the diptych, which makes reference to the white heart in the original, but there it's a human being with the mask and these sort of uncanny forms. And then on the left-hand side, you have almost like COVID, where it's almost like in place of the king, that's sort of ruling over our lives at the moment. So for me, it's an interesting time to be able to think about these fairly crucial themes, but to do it artistically, to have the time to really explore it properly. Sorry, did you want to say something? I'm sorry to.
No, it's interesting because the combination of the black and white and the gold is, as you say, beauty. And then, I mean, the black and white is very, very dark in the images that you're drawing. So the two going together is kind of hopeful, but at the same time, very realistic about what's going on and your thoughts, absorbed in that gold. So it's fascinating for me.
Well, I think there's something, and as Jews, we know this better than anyone, there's something actually inherently beautiful in being able to comment on a difficult period. The very fact that you comment or make a poem or a work of art or a prayer, for that matter, out of a dark period, that itself is of great value to be able to do, I think. So,
also, you're helping us stand back and reflect.
Yeah.
So many of us, we're just living in the moment and what we're dealing with, and you're making us think more about what this means in a thoughtful and a beautiful way. So it's very helpful. Yeah,
and in some of the drawings, I've tried to connect it with previous periods of tragedy. And of course, humanity always gets through it, really. I mean, kind of all this stuff is, I know it's slightly different in many ways, but humanity does endure these periods. You get through it, And in a way, to leave a little sort of whisper in the form of an artwork behind is also quite a nice thing to do, in a way. and that kind of remains. And then I went from the drawings into paintings, into very large paintings. So that was the second lockdown. So it kind of matches the lockdown periods in a way. So during the second lockdown, I'd been to the Tate Britain, where they have these fantastic big galleries called the Duveen Galleries. I don't know if you've seen. And just looking at the spaces, I had an absolutely meshuggah idea of painting a cycle of paintings that would fill the whole space about this period in time, about the COVID period. And I really went bananas. I mean, I ordered tens of meters of canvas and did one of the most ridiculously ambitious projects that I've ever done. And again, there's something very positive about doing that, you know, just the mishigas of the whole thing.
Right.
It's quite, you know, that's a life force. That's, you want to capture that life force. So this is a very large painting, like the drawing of every person throughout the world in their own little bubble. Images of kind of spheres have been in my work before. This sculpture, which was commissioned by Anthony Rosenfeld and family in memory of the late Marilyn Rosenfelder, is Barry Tzedek. And that's a sculpture which is a human in the form of a globe. And the idea of that, again, has a Jewish basis, the idea that it's outside a hospital. And the idea that if you save one life, you save the whole world entire. From, I think it's Sanhedrin, the idea. The famous line. And so to make a human being that is a whole globe in one, and that's outside the hospital. So I've kind of been playing with that image of the human globe, as it were. Because
and also because it's so clear, it reflects everything around it as well. So it brings in everything around it at the same time.
No, absolutely. And I found when I've done works in Israel, the light very much impacts on the way I do a work. So the light in Jerusalem doesn't quite fit. It doesn't quite match bronze in a way, dark bronze. I think it's better with this material where you have that.
Yes.
Also, of course, in Jerusalem, there are problems with figurative art. You have to be careful what's allowed. There's fairly strict rules about that. So this is a piece opposite Migdal David, the same, where it's an image of the globe, and that's from the Jerusalem Foundation. So they had very clear strictures about what was allowed. So it's quite abstract, but it's also based on the image of the world being born out of the clover leaf. Don't know how much more time we have.
Sorry, we're doing fine. You keep going. It's great.
So this is one of the paintings from that ambitious series that I was just talking about. That's actually called Pandemic. It's like a massive cloudburst, but the image in the center, you see the scale, it's painted out of 6 canvases, each of which is 2 by 3 meters, give or take. So it's a very large, very tough work, very, very detailed work. And it's almost like a COVID shape where actually the COVID is entirely made of humanity. And then and that's bursting out towards almost the whole world. You have all these figures sort of dancing around and has this tremendous force and energy. And that's, it's kind of beautiful in a way, but it's also quite threatening. So I wanted to capture that idea that this is a natural thing, if it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing that's causing all this unbelievable mayhem. And in the whole world, for once, it's quite rare for the whole world to be going through the same thing at the same time. Where you have...
Was this, if I could ask you personally, David, the act of doing these large, as you said, slightly, massive, meshuggah projects, is this your way of coping to an extent?
Yeah,
what's going on?
I've kind of always done it, but I think during this period, for everyone, just to set oneself these kind of projects.
Right.
So this is from the second lockdown. We're now in the third lockdown, so I had to set myself a new project, which I'll come to. But I think it is a way of coping. But it's also, you kind of create your own reality. And at the moment, artists always create their own realities. But at the moment, that's a very valuable thing to do, to create your own reality. Even though we're very isolated and in our own little worlds, maybe there could be some real value in that, and maybe it's an opportunity in a sense.
Well, I can see it's not just it's also you processing reality in the way you look at the world.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important for an artist to reflect their time, their period of time, what's happening in the world. And it happens naturally. It's not something you set out to do. It naturally happens that that what's going on comes into your work. Right. This is the second large piece in that series. It's called Lockdown, where you can see everybody kind of contained in their own little pod. throughout the world.
Right.
And then they're all contained in these little separate containers. You can't see it from here, but in every single one, there's different things happening. Somebody watching Zoom, somebody running, somebody eating, watching TV. There's a lot of detail in this. And then you have that reflected in the sky, almost like stars in the sky, because the idea that this is happening all over the world, we're on this,
right.
but it's happening there too. It's an amazing thing, this absolutely vast event happening to everybody all over the world is fairly unprecedented and very powerful an artistic concept, apart from being, a terrible thing. And that's an image of as how I conceived it. It's a mock-up. These works.
Are they going to be in the gallery? Are they?
I don't know yet. I did them without any commitment or guarantee. And that's the crazy thing. Probably not. But you kind of don't care. I had to do it anyway, just out of my own passion. And it's almost like a chutzpah thing in a way.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's the whole cycle. It's almost like in the figure of a human being when you look at them all from above.
Right.
That's the whole cycle of paintings from this.
Is this the Duvain Gallery in the Tate that you're mocking up?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's Lord Duvain from Golders Greens, Jewish boy.
Was he originally? I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, because the Elgin marble, it's the same guy. The Elgin marbles in the British Museum. It's the Duvain Gallery, and that's Lord Duvain of Golders Green. So if it's the same guy, then he is.
Oh, really? Didn't know that. Amazing. Okay, that's just a view of the studio of one of the works from that series.
I think it shows you the size very well. Yeah.
But the motif it's a very simple, almost like yin yang form, but they're both masked. So this idea they're all masked and passing each other. We're connected, but we're not connected. All those subjects.
Yeah. Do you always walk in shorts?
I try to. Yeah. Yeah. Depends on the weather.
Yeah.
Okay, these are just some more from the series. Okay, I know we don't have much more time, but during the same period, I was conceiving sculptures. These don't actually exist in large scale yet. These are small models that are then mocked up, and they're all based on walks on the heath. So I'd walk around the heath and look at a particular location, and then kind of dream up a new work and make the models back at the studio in clay. And that was also during the first and second lockdown.
Yeah, no, I think rising out of the earth actually into the sky is very clever as well. It's very, because you really think as you watch each one of them, it's really dynamic.
Yeah, well, the idea, it's kind of carries on from the emergence theme, but it's kind of an image of hope and prayer, I would say.
Kind of on the left. On the right, I just see Golem. That's what I see. I see Golem from Lord of the Rings. But again, it's interacting with this environment. You imagine it moving. It's fantastic.
Well, actually, when I go for a walk, I'll actually look at particular scenes, and then you kind of almost get like a kind of waking dream of what could be there. And then it's the challenge is to actually then start making it. I'm kind of halfway there because I've got the small models.
Right.
Well, that's this one. That's in bronze now. But
right.
I'd like to make it the large scale at some point.
Very fantastic.
Yeah. So, and that's another one from the series that, again, like aspiring upwards, which I think is an image of hope, going beyond the way, going beyond the emergence. And then during all... Sorry, to change.
No, that feels like a child. I don't know why. That feels like a young person. But maybe it's the angle. I don't know.
Which one? This one?
No, the previous. That feels like a child, like as opposed to you're a young man.
Yeah.
As opposed to that's older. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. So and at the same time as all of that, just in the summer, completely uncharacteristic, I started doing a series of landscapes from my garden, and in a very something strange, it's almost longing for travel. They're all images of the coast and the sea, even though I wasn't. I kind of imagined the coast of the sea beyond the end of the garden, which is kind of compatible with this image of sort of looking beyond and hoping. And they were really just all about pure light and color. It's kind of a release from quite intense thoughts. They're almost like palettes in a way. You're kind of playing with paint on the palette and then looking up into the distance, which is like the sky and sea, and just a passion to paint for its own sake and get away from it all, as it were, but in paint. So I think that's if we have any questions, that's my story.
Well, I'll ask one question and then we'll open it up to the people, which is, at the end, you really feel, David, that you're creating your own reality.
Yeah.
In that sense, the artist is like God, in that they're controlling, they're making their world. So I just wanted to ask you, in terms of that aspect of it, of this power that you're coming out of you, but also as a religious Jew feeling subservient to God. How do the two meet, if I can ask? It's a very personal question, and I'm doing it out of the blue, but I'm fascinated. How does it meet inside you in terms of the way you daven or the way you look at God, but then the way you look at yourself as an artist, as a creator?
Well, I think the way I think about it is, again, walking. We're all walking a lot now, and I have a lot of my best thinking then about, certainly about God. That if I walk in a field and I often think either every blade of grass is evidence of God or none of them are. And for me, every blade of grass is. So every blade of grass, every leaf, the blue sky, every one of those things is the most tremendous, glowing, glorious evidence of God. And that's what I try and translate into my work. It's that sense of the divine and the elevated. And I think that's how it works for me. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. If you want to unshare, so we can see you, and then if anyone wants to unmute and ask you a question, or in the chat, then feel free. I'm opening you up to the masses. Yeah, if you just press the unshare on the top there.
Okay.
If you go to the very top, if you go to the very top of the screen, there you go.
Okay.
So, questions for David?
David.
Yes.
Any of the large ones being done in small?
Yeah.
Yes, all of them practically. Yes. They all start.
I know, because I wrote to you weeks because my emerging family needs a companion.
Yes.
And can you see?
With the feet up.
I love this.
Very good. Yeah.
I love this.
Thank you. Yeah, normally I do everything in miniature first. That's where it's...
I know, because you posted something a few months ago before this third lockdown.
Yeah.
And I said that I'd come over with Pinchas to see it. It was something you posted, I can't remember, but it caught my love immediately. I can't even remember what it was. It was in this genre.
Okay. I want you to remember, do you remember the three paintings?
The triptych. I know I wrote to him that it's in our daughter's house.
Yes, your cousin has liked it and pinched it.
Sarah, our granddaughter, loves it. It's in their house now.
Oh, thank you.
That's great.
I think
do we have more? We've got more questions, comments.
I think in all your art, I know you don't like me talking so much. I think in all your art, there is a great Kiddush Hashem, and I watch you in shul.
Amen.
On the Yom Naroyim, and it's very intense, and it comes out in your pictures and your art, and it's Avodat Kodesh, your Betzalel. Look at the Ner Tamid you made in our shul.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Avodat Kodesh.
Thank you.
Amen.
Okay, enough from me.
Thank you.
I'm not saying any more. Where's everybody else?
David, have you done any other shul art?
I wanted to ask, how do you get the commission? How does somebody want you to put something in a helicopter site in Turkey? How does that come about?
Well, that came about because I did an exhibition at Christie's, and the client was a client of Christie's who ordered it from the catalogue. In that case,
is that his personal site?
For his collection.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
David, have you done any other shul art?
Very little. I've done in terms of that kind of thing. I like to do it as a kind of hiddur mitzvah. But I haven't done very much of it. It's not really my main thing, but I like to design the odd piece of silver for sure.
Yes, you're going to make us a machitza one of these days.
Yeah, not as a commercial thing, just as, very, very rare, on occasion. Let's put it that way.
None of your works are commercial. You're doing it l'shem shamayim.
That's not true.
I hope so.
Not very commercial.
You need to go on mute.
Hi.
Yeah.
So tell me, all your big works then are commissioned.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the very large sculptures are commissioned.
So would you like to tell us all where we can find them? Some of them you've mentioned and some of them you haven't.
Yes, I've got, well, there's a few out there at the moment. There's one in Cavendish Square called Visitor, which is the half head.
Oh.
And then there's a couple in Portman Square, and then one in Docklands, which is out there at the moment.
David, what's the gestation period for one of your big works from thinking to installation?
Well, it's a very good question. The one of Brothers, where they're sharing a mind, I did my first drawing for that when I was about 15 years old and kept it in a stamp album, tiny little drawing, and it only became a sculpture about 7 or 8 years ago. So it could be very long. It could be 20, 30 years easily. And that's really interesting because you can forget completely that you thought about something. It just kind of shows that you're the same person as you were in a funny kind of way.
Mm.
If we wanted to do a trail, go around and look at all your works in London, is there like a trail of David Breuer-Weil works? So we could...
Well, I did have that actually, but I should make a new one. I can create that.
Okay, good. Once we're allowed.
Huh?
If we're allowed.
Oh yeah, if we're allowed. Yeah, exactly.
You could take us on a walk round, a virtual.
Well, that's the advantage of having sculptures outside. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you could.
Well, especially now, that's an advantage having them outside. For sure.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Or you could do it with your phone, walking around each of them, conducting us round. We could have another evening after Shabbos, and we could walk around all your London sculptures.
There might be a way of doing that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think daytime is better because we can see more. But it'd be great.
Yeah.
So
can I just ask you what the sculptures are behind you?
Oh yeah, I did those in the days before the new year, and it's a set. I'm planning a series of cutout works in iron, and those are just paper studies, very, very rough studies for a new series of works that I haven't done yet. It's kind of a zodiac.
Can I ask, do you have a preferred medium, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, or as you said just now, paper?
Well, I try to use all kinds of different media. What binds it all together is the same kind of way of thinking or delving into meaning, I would say. I've often felt that a lot of art these days is not about meaning. It can be very commercial or a bit empty of meaning. For me, it's about finding meaning. Now, I may find that through paper or bronze or steel or paint. I tend to use all those media. I was kind of trained in all of them. And you kind of know which day, because you kind of feel almost in your bones what material you want to express that thought with, whether it's clay or oil, or that's very, very instinctive, that feeling.
Thank you.
But actually, numerically, probably most of my works are just simple pencil drawings. That's what I do most of all is drawing.
Can I just ask which artists you're influenced by, or who your favorite artist is, if you have one?
Well, many, very many. I think Goya is one of them. Van Gogh is certainly one of them. I find Picasso's constant energy and imagination certainly one of them, but very many. I mean, it's a bit hard for me to single them out because it's very so much part of what I'm doing and thinking the whole time. But yeah, many. And also ancient art, particularly. I used to visit the British Museum an awful lot, so ancient Egyptian, Etruscan, Roman. I like a lot of those materials, stone and rock and bronze and all that.
David, can I ask, did you always want to be an artist? I mean, when you were at university or school,
I come from an artistic family. My father is a sculptor, jeweler and painter, and he lives in Israel. So my brother was the rebel in the family. He became a banker, you see. So I can't say I was a rebel. He was the rebel. You know, but yes, I mean,
I think it was part of the Edgware influence, David. I think you have to say.
Could be. Could be. Yeah.
Inspirational, wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so David, can we thank you very much? You've shown us your art. We're fascinated by it. We want to see more, and you've reflected about what it's like creating it under lockdown, and your reactions as a religious Jew, and finding the way you look at the world really fascinates me. And as you said, it's art with meaning. That there's something always beyond, which is very Jewish in lots of ways. That we refer to something always beyond what we're just seeing itself. It stands for something in meaning. And it was very powerful to see those pieces. I looked on Friday when you showed me, and again now, and I very much enjoyed that, and I know everybody else did as well. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.